Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to our colleagues who are joining us from across the pond. My name is Zsuzsanna Végh. I'm a program officer at the German Marshall Fund of the United States and also the manager of our ReThink.CEE Fellowship program. And today I have the pleasure to welcome you to our panel discussion titled Phantom Voters, Organized Voter Migration and Electoral Integrity in the Western Balkans. This discussion takes part under the umbrella of the ReThink.CEE Fellowship program, which is a fellowship that we have been running for 7 years already in support of young analysts and researchers from across the regions of Central Europe, the Western Balkans, and Eastern Europe. This is a way of supporting the development of young analysts and researchers in their native countries, and also a contribution to the evidence-based policy analysis we hope think tanks across the regions are embracing. Today we have Aleksandar Ivkovic, one of our ReThink.CEE fellows, presenting his research project and obviously his findings, which focused on, as the title of the event suggests, organized voter migration across the Western Balkans. Just to quickly clarify, the term organized voter migration, or as it is very often also referred to, voter tourism, is a practice where fictitious residencies are registered and groups of voters are moved across municipalities or sometimes even national borders in order to sway electoral outcomes. Although this practice is, of course, not only present in the Western Balkans, the past decade has shown several instances when this has happened across multiple countries. And this is a practice that is, of course, undermines trust in electoral integrity and in democratic resilience, elections being the very cornerstones of every democracy. So to discuss this topic, we have with us together three great experts. Aleksandar is our ReThink.CEE fellow from Serbia, whose study we will present. Also, we are joined by Zlatko Vujovic, who is the executive director of ENEMO and the president of the Center for Monitoring and Research from Montenegro. And we have with us Dario Jovanovic, who is a project manager at the Centers for Civic Initiative from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Together, they will help us unpack not only how organized voter migration operates, but also why it still persists across the region. And of course, we are also practice-oriented, so we will try to find some strategies how this could be countered. So after this short overview, I would like to pass the floor to Aleksandar to share with us his research findings, and then we will also open the floor for a discussion. In the meantime, if you have any comments, questions, please do use the Q&A function of our Zoom webinar, and I will make sure to pick up your questions as we go further. Aleksandar, please, if you wish, then the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsanna. I will immediately share my brief presentation of my research and my findings. Let me just turn the presentation on. Okay, I hope you can see now the PowerPoint presentation. So I would like, of course, to thank GMF for supporting my research. I would also like to thank Zlatko and Dario for contributing to it, both as panelists today, but also interviewees for my paper, and their inputs are reflected in the paper itself, which I hope you will have an opportunity to read. Zsuzsanna already defined organized voter migrations, which is not the only term we use for this practice, but I think it is the most accurate description of the essence of the problem. As we have already heard, it involves organizing people who do not reside in a certain location to go there and to vote for a particular candidate or a party. So these people are organized by, usually by those candidates or parties in order to sway election results. This is always an illegitimate practice. So to put it bluntly, like a person who lives in Belgrade, for example, and votes in Belgrade should not also have a right to vote in Novi Sad, Niš, Sarajevo, Podgorica, other places in Serbia or in the region. And as you can probably guess, we are mostly talking about local municipal elections here, regional elections, so elections where location is important. So the practice is illegitimate and it is mostly illegal, though there are some gray zones where it might not be violating the law directly, but the illegitimacy of the activity remains. And usually, though not always, the mechanism is a fictitious residency, which is also what Zsuzsanna mentioned. So a person is registered at a certain address. He or she gets an ID card. He or she is automatically added to the voter register and gets a right to vote. Though we had some cases in Serbia pretty recently, actually, in one city in June, where local elections were held, where even without residencies, people were added to the voter register according to actually police reports. So it's not the only mechanism that is used, but it is the most frequent one and the most prominent one. And through this mechanism, you get the stories of like 50 people living at the being registered actually at the same address, which is sometimes not even an apartment, but a construction site or waterworks, power stations, so on. So this is how these activities usually get to the public. And when it comes to electoral irregularities in the Western Balkans, it is often a secondary issue since, as you probably can assume, it's still a logistically difficult operation. So not that many voters can usually, it is assumed, be migrated that easily. But in places where the results are close, where only a small number of votes can decide who is the winner and who is the loser, then it can actually, of course, be a major issue and become a politically sensitive topic. And this is actually what happened in Serbia in 2023-2024 local election cycle. And this local election cycle is actually what inspired me to write this paper, because this was the point in Serbia where, for a limited period of time, the topic of organized voter migrations became the #1 political issue in Serbia. And there are still some political consequences about which I will talk in a couple of minutes. But as you can see from this list, and this is not the final list, this is just a list of examples of most prominent, probably, allegations in the region in recent years and decade and a half, probably. But this is not a complete list. It is just here to give you a sense of how widespread these allegations are. And you notice that I use the word allegations. This is because there are usually no legal fallouts or ramifications or official investigations about this practice. And we will get in a minute, in a second, to the reason why that is the case. I think this year in Montenegro there were some sentences for the case of Shavnik local elections and organized voter migrations that took place there. But this is not a frequent occurrence. So mostly we are talking about allegations which have compelling evidence. And in many cases, it was either opposition parties or election watchdogs, such as CERTA in Serbia in the case of 2023-2024 local elections, media outlets that bring some evidence to light, but then nothing is done usually on the level of state institutions, which creates an atmosphere of distrust, which creates tensions, which creates tensions that can spill over to other countries, because sometimes it is not only about internal quote-unquote migrations, but as Zsuzsanna also mentioned in her introduction, it is about regional migrations. So this is a problem that can become even a top problem in a country in certain conditions, but even when it is not on the top of the agenda of political issues or electoral problems, it is still a form of election fraud that should be dealt with. What are the enabling factors of this phenomenon? The most important one is state capture. So the phenomenon in which political elites, political parties, through the use of clientelist networks, force the state institutions basically to do their bidding, to not work in public interest, but to work in the interest of the party. And this is how, even though there are some legal safeguards in the Western Balkans against falsifying a residency, so it is usually a punishable offense, this is frequently, as I mentioned, not investigated because of the state capture, because the institutions themselves are complicit and they are not going to investigate themselves. Political will to remove state capture is actually the main solution to the problem. But as we know, this is a very hard thing to produce and to cause. But we will get to the specific solutions in the next and final slide. I will just mention another two enabling factors here. So there's also the fact that citizens in the region of the Western Balkans, many citizens have multiple residencies in different countries. And this is not always a phenomenon that arises because of the voter fraud or an intention to influence election results. It can have multiple causes. Some people simply move from one country to another due to political reasons, economic reasons, security reasons. They do not relinquish their residency. They get a new residency. They can get new residencies for all sorts of factors. And passivization of residencies in a country where a person does not reside is, of course, always a controversial and sensitive issue. So there is a number of people in the region suspected of having multiple residencies in different countries, which can then be used for organized voter migration. This problem should be resolved because according to legal definitions, residency is a place where a person has moved to with an intention to permanently settle and live there, and it is a center of their life activities, which indicates that a person should have only one residency. But resolving this problem on a regional level would require cooperation between the countries, which is also something that is difficult to come by. And the final enabling factor, which I would like to mention, is the non-transparency of the voter registers. When it comes to the issue of transparency of voter registers, we are talking about who gets to see the data from the voter register and when. Can the citizens do it? Can the candidates in elections do it? Political parties, election observers? Can they just see a snapshot of voter register at one period of time? Or can they see the developments and how the number has changed throughout the years, which would then enable the observers, for example, to detect suspicious patterns? And this is where the factor of transparency is crucial. It is not the solution in and of itself, but if the transparency of the voter registers was maximized, it would enable, first and foremost, civil society organizations, but also political parties to create public pressure and political pressure on the governments and ruling parties to address this issue. But then we would be returning to the issue of political will. So final slide about the solutions. I already mentioned maximizing transparency. The most, and this is what all experts, I guess, come to the same conclusion, that the most comprehensive way to address the issue of organized voter migrations and to increase the trust in the voter registers is a full voter register audit and regular follow-ups. To this date, only in North Macedonia in 2016, during that country's political crisis, was a limited voter register audit carried out by their Central Electoral Commission. It resolved some issues, but the success was limited, as election observers noted in their reports following that election. In Serbia, and here is where I return to the political outcome of the 2023-2024 local election cycle that I mentioned. The European Union actually set the condition of carrying out voter register audit because of the controversies produced in that election cycle as one of the conditions for Serbia to advance further in its EU accession path. And this created some semblance of political pressure and conditionality, which was not as strong as it could have been, because the EU has not insisted on this issue as fiercely as it could have. But it at least created some, as I say, conditionality for the government for the time being. And yesterday, ahead of today's visit of President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to Serbia, the government seems to have accepted, the ruling majority seems to have accepted the changes to the legislation, which would create the preconditions for voter register audit, but only preconditions. We need to see whether this commission that is proposed by legislation will be formed, who will be in it, will it be able to operate, will the voter register audit be able to be carried out before the next election? So these are all open questions, and the current political atmosphere in Serbia does not actually provide much reason for optimism, but we shall see. Another solution that is often talked about is regional data sharing and regional cooperation. That this should actually address the issue that I mentioned of people having residencies in different countries, and then of course also political will be necessary to define where can a person have residency and can a person have multiple residencies or not. This is, of course, a controversial, as I said, political issue, but it is the only way to solve it. And when it comes to the activities of the civil society organizations and the European Union, I already mentioned how civil society organizations were instrumental in creating political pressure by actually analyzing data, by collecting evidence, by participating in voter register audit potentially in Serbia and also in North Macedonia. So the role of the CSOs and the election watchdogs cannot be overstated. And the EU can play its role, as we have seen in Serbia, although, as I say, this is a limited conditioning that could have been much better. But the EU has some leverage in making this issue making this issue a priority for a government to solve if it wants to. And based on my research and based on the frequency in which organized voter migrations and allegations of organized voter migrations happen in the region, we just had allegations in local elections in Kosovo, which took place on Sundays. So we had allegations of also both Serb parties and Albanian parties carrying out this practice. Also, I will once again emphasize these are allegations. It's not been proven, but the evidence is compelling. this phenomenon will continue to occur unless somebody stops it and puts an end to it. And occasionally, as in the case of Serbia, as in the case also of North Macedonia a decade ago, it can produce quite negative political consequences. So it should be in the interest of the citizens, of course, to increase the trust in the voter registry to make this practice go away. I cannot stress this enough, political will is the key, and pressure from all sorts of sides is necessary to produce that political will. So thank you. These would be the main findings of my research. Of course, in my paper, I present an overview of legislation and the transparency provisions, current transparency provisions, but we are expecting this to evolve in the future. I provide a description of the most prominent cases of organized voter migration, and I analyze these solutions in a bit of more detail. So what are the main elements when it comes to voter register audit, what should be how it should be organized, what are the experiences of North Macedonia and proposals in Serbia, what are they telling us, but for now I will conclude this brief presentation, and I guess we can touch upon those issues during our panel discussion. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aleksandar. And I would also like to encourage all of you to download and read Aleksandar's overview. It's extremely thorough and I believe very well done. It gives us a very comprehensive picture of the situation on the ground in the region. I have put the link to the chat, so you can directly access it there. And of course, we will also put this link to the video when we upload it to our YouTube channel. So those watching us later can also check this. All right, without really inserting any questions here, I would like to turn to Zlatko first to ask for your comments and feedback on this presentation that we have just heard. You have an extremely rich experience with election observation, election monitoring across the region. So obviously this issue is very well known to you. Maybe if I could just ask you to also address in your contribution to what extent this is a systemic, widespread phenomenon across the region, whether there are any differences across the countries that could be, I think, very useful to contextualize it a little bit further. It's clear that it has been recurrently occurring across the region, but what does evidence and these substantiated allegations really show us about the severity of the problem?
Okay, I can talk now. So thank you, Zsuzsanna, for organizing this panel. It is a great pleasure to be with you and to discuss about the study that was developed by Aleksandar Ivkovic. I was pleasantly surprised, and it was my pleasure to be interviewed by Aleksandar during his research, because this is an extremely important issue that somehow was neglected for all this time when we are comparing with other reasons, let's say, that are endangering and damaging integrity of electoral process. So I will start with commending Aleksandar Ivkovic for outstanding and timely analysis. His study on organized voter migration in Western Balkans sheds light on one of the most dangerous, least discussed threats to democracy in our region: the systematic manipulation of voter registers through illegal, multiply, permanent resident cross-border mobilization voters. So in your question, you somehow raised the issue about how this is systemic, how this is widespread. And we can see from this study, but also from the practices and research from the NGOs in the region that are acting as the watchdog that is widespread, and its existence appears on two levels. One is within the country, on the local level, between the municipality, on the municipal level, and one that is also explained by the colleague Ivkovic, that explains this cross-border dimension of this problem. So I would say this is the structural abuse of institution. As Ivkovic also mentioned, the concept of state capture, where an entire administration, from interior ministries to local legislatures, become tools for political control rather than guardians of the democratic process. This issue was exposed during the December 2023 local election in Serbia, but it exists for decades, and it is present in Montenegro, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Serbia, but also I'm somehow bolding these three countries because there is no language barrier, and there is a quite intensive migration of the people between three countries from the different reasons. As Aleksandar mentioned in his introductory speech, reason why someone has more than one permanent residency, and one person could have only one permanent residence. It could be different reasons. What we identified during our research is that mainly the reasons are in order to avoid the taxes on the real estate that they are in possess in the different countries, then in order to access to the free education and the free health service. But easily those people can be captured by the structure like President Vučić party and blackmail because they are evading the taxes. And now there are some estimation. We compare in the case of Montenegro that up more than 80,000 of the people are illegally registered in the voter registry of Montenegro. We conducted one, let's say it was not audit, but actually we controlled all voters in one municipality in Montenegro. It is Herceg-Novi, where elections for all local level were held a few years ago. And we compared with the voter registry in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We brought with the results that 10.54% of the voters were illegally registered in the voter registry of Herceg-Novi. And we submitted to the state authorities proofs in order that those voters should be removed from the voter registry. Then the ministry faked the communication with the Ministry of the Interior of Serbia, and the decision of the agency for protection of the personal data was that all proofs of the illegal voting should be destroyed. And they ordered to the Ministry of Interior to destroy proofs provided by CeMI in Montenegro. And that happened like that. They destroyed the proofs, and the Ministry of the Interior of Serbia ordered to the State Electoral Commission to make it less possible to control the data for the voter registry of Serbia. Only in Montenegro, and I think that Ivkovic mentioned that in the study, it is allowed to the civil society organization to access to the voter registry and to check data from the voter about every voters. But this is not the case in the region. And I think that civil society organizations should get the same access, but also this problem, when we are talking about the cross-border dimension of this problem, could be solved only if we compare the data from the voter registry in the region in order to check integrity of one electoral process in one country. Because the Vučić probably used this model that existed not only in the Western Balkan countries, but it was identified in Georgia, in Moldova, in Ukraine. But somehow, I think until the 2023 local election in Belgrade, it was never used in so massive and systemic a way like President Vučić organized in order to rig elections in Belgrade. So now this is somehow on the radar of the different organization, which was not case before, because it was less structure and less organized than it was before, than in the case of local election in Belgrade. So it is very important that somehow we pay more attention to this problem and use, as Mr. Ivkovic mentioned in his recommendation at the end, that EU should be somehow involved, and actually this should be one of the issue of negotiation process. So Ivkovic in paper is rightly emphasized this is not an isolated national problem, but regional and systemic challenge that requires both political will and cross-border cooperation. It is very important to pay attention to his recommendation call to the European Union to make the integrity and transparency of the voter registers a formal condition for further progress in the accession process. This approach would ensure that genuine democratic standards, not just formal compliance, determine the pace of EU integration for the Western Balkans. Civil society has already taken important steps in this direction. Organizations such as CeMI in Montenegro, CETA in Serbia, and others across the region have initiated the proposal of cross-matching voter register among Western Balkan countries, a concrete and technically feasible solution to identify double or triple registration and prevent cross-border manipulation. Such a regional mechanism, supported and incentivized by the EU, could become one of the most effective tools for safeguarding electoral integrity. Therefore, the next stage should be clear. The EU should integrate this regional voter register cooperation in its enlargement conditionality, treating it as a test of candidate countries' commitment to democracy, rule of law. Because, as Ivkovic and civil society organizations remind us, without clean voter register, there is no clean election. And without fair election, there is no democracy, no legitimacy, and no genuine European future for the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zlatko, for this and also for highlighting the centrality of what Aleksandar also mentioned, but that of political will to tackle the issue across the region. You both have mentioned the potential role of the European Union here, and indeed, under the Copenhagen criteria, the first condition is a functioning democratic state, which is, of course, based on free and fair elections as well. So indeed, it sounds like that the European Union would have some leverage and some arguments to pursue resolving this problem in the region. I would like to now turn to Dario to share his views, potentially add to the case's regional experience. Dario, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zsuzsanna. Thank you for calling me and giving me opportunity to speak today. And thank you for especially to Aleksandar for engaging me in this research. It was a really interesting conversation, and I can recall exact what we have discussed back then when the paper was prepared. I want to compliment also to Aleksandar on the paper itself. I think it is highly relevant. I think it is highly timely, especially considering that this was a subject in recent period more than ever, considering that how big impact this can have on the local election level. And probably the most prominent case was Belgrade election. I think that all the obstacles, all the issues were properly addressed in the paper. I think that relevant examples are really interesting from multiple countries, multiple local communities, and from multiple different aspects, how this can be manipulated and organized, as well as that recommendations are in place, and many of those were actually, if implemented, almost totally exclusively fix the situation that we currently discussed and that we have. For the beginning, I want to say that hopefully we agree, or if not that, our position at least on two things is pretty clear from the position of the CCI, my organization, but also Podlupom, which is coalition of 40 organizations which organizely monitor elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the last 11 years. The first one is that no one should vote if they do not live in that local community. We think this is deeply unfair for citizens who live in that local community, and we see this as a nonsense, especially taking consideration what are the ingerencies of local communities. And taking consideration other Western democracies, more developed countries with a bigger history or tradition of democracy, this is something that is followed also. You could vote in general elections because you are a citizen of that country, you have some kind of the legitimate interest, let's say that way, but still you will not be able to vote in local elections, in majority of them, since it is not the place where you satisfy your needs as a citizen. Again, especially because this is usually issues of waste management, water treatment, housing, and similar things on the local level. Second, strong standpoint where we stand, we think that the voter register should be public, as stated in the law, at least in case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we strongly think and hold this position that it is not the case. So publicity of the voter register in accordance with the protection of personal data would probably be the best way to fix this problem of the organized voter migration internally or externally. So greater transparency is needed, not just for the sake of audit of the voter register, which can be done by the institutions, or more hopefully with the or by the independent actors such as civil society organizations or ODIHR or organizations who are skillful in election observation matters. But it is also important because the best way to keep the integrity of voter register is to let people discover what is wrong with the voter register. So if I could check whether there are some persons who do not live in my building, in my entrance of the building, it would easily trigger myself to report it or to at least complain about this fact. If there is voter register which is transparent enough, those people who are way elderly than some kind of the usual statistical, let's say, discrepancies or insights could be easily detected what is their size of the manipulation. Comparison of data between people who gave up of citizenship but are still on the voter register would be possible. The many people living in the same address in the building which cannot absorb that much people, which was happening all over the region, would be visible, and so on and so on. So just to repeat myself, our strong point is that no one should vote in local elections if they do not live in that local community, and voter register should be public as much as possible. Yes, the paper and the subject itself can be looked from at least two different levels, and this is like internal voter migration, organized voter migration, and external organized voter migration. And depending on whether we see it as internal or external problem or both, it depends how we react on it. Do we react on the national level or we react on the regional level, which needs additional coordination and exchange of information? Fortunately or unfortunately, we have good examples about this. Internally, I will just mention one case. In case of Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2016, there were local elections, and we had one municipality which is called Trnovo. We have actually two municipalities called Trnovo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This one was belonging to Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, one entity, where we had around 2,600 voters being registered. it is pretty small and it is nothing extraordinary when you mention that. But if you compare census data for that municipality, which was only 3 years older than that elections, being held in 2016, which happened in 2013, we saw that the number of inhabitants in that community was 1,500. So we had almost double number of voters than the number of inhabitants, residents, including minors. And for this situation to be even more strange, 86.3% was the turnout in these elections. So 2,200 people voted, 700 more than they lived there, including minors that they live there. So these type of calculations and this type of data are only triggered to deep check or deep seek, deep ask for deep seek is not probably the best word now for the additional reasons why that, and then you ask yourself, and then you go to talk to people, and this is small municipality, this is rural municipality, but this is municipality where with extraordinary natural resources. Bjelašnica mountain, which is Olympic mountain, was almost wholly covered or belongs to this municipality. And there was a proven track of records of illegal construction there. The current mayor was imprisoned. Actually, not the current, the previous mayor now is not in the position anymore for this wrongdoing. So there was obvious interest for someone to influence the election outcome in order to have the majority in the council, in order to influence potential corrupt behavior. And this is the reason why. And when we talk to people, we figured out how they do it. They do it in a way that they transfer voters, move voters from the really big municipality in Sarajevo or leaning in Sarajevo as a city or Sarajevo canton, where they have traditional voters and they know that they will win the race. So from this big municipality, taking a small portion of people, which is maybe around 1.5–2% of population, and moving in another where it is now becoming 40% of population, means that you will not damage yourself in a result or outcome level, but you will help yourself in another municipality to be secure that you have majority in order to go for corruption and to hide this state capture phenomena, as you said. And second, of course, is Belgrade. Belgrade is a really interesting example. And Belgrade is an example which shows somehow the not paradox situation, but the situation where we see that organized voter migration is even more present when the race is tight. Because then they can be the decisive factor on the weight, they can determine the outcome of the race. And the reason why we saw that in December 23 in Belgrade was because they were not sure that they will win, probably. And then the numbers were bigger. We speak about from 36,000 to 50,000 people by some work done, especially by CRTA in Serbia, which appeared physically there, came with the busing, were organized, orchestrated by the ruling party in the big city hall, where to vote, how to vote, where they are actually residing, because they don't even know where they live in Belgrade, because factually, de facto, they do not live there, So there is a bunch of problems with the voters list inside the Bosnia and Herzegovina, such as that it's over-exaggerated. I can especially speak on it, that it is not updated, that it is hidden, it is not transparent. When you hide something, it is already suspicious, and especially when you have disorganized problems. But everything regarding this topic on a regional level result in something that we call internally as voting phalangas. The group of people which will vote in Bosnia, in Banja Luka, for example, but the same group of people which will vote in Belgrade, and the same group of people which will potentially vote in Podgorica. And then you have, the falsification of the results on a big scale, because you are just, transferring with these nomads as you have necessity to influence the outcome your purpose. Yeah, I will stop there, and I'm welcoming more of your questions. Thank you so much, and Aleksandar, once more, thank you for having us in as part of the research. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dario, especially also for these very concrete, practical examples that really shed light on the practice. I think this is very helpful to make the process more understandable, also for those who may not be working on this topic like me. So thank you very much for that. This has been extremely insightful. Aleksandar, I would like to give you back the floor for a few minutes for any immediate reflections. And I have already started collecting some questions also from the Q&A. I would like to thank our participants who have already shared their questions with us. They are well noted. And I would also like to encourage everyone else to put their questions, comments in the Q&A function down under our video. Aleksandar, please, if you have any immediate reflections, share those with us, and then we will move into the discussion.
Thank you, Zsuzsanna, and thank you once again to both Zlatko and Dario for their comments and their participation in the research. And I think they both covered this topic in their comments quite well, and that they gave us more examples and more recommendations, and that the details of those recommendations are something that we should be discussing further, both in this conversation and in the future. I would maybe want to touch upon the issue of transparency of the voter registry, and I have something that was interesting for me to note, that the new law on the unified voter registry in Serbia, which is going to probably be adopted soon because of the EU conditionality. It consists actually of two elements that are new. One is the voter registry audit and the commission that should be set up. And the other one is the increased transparency of the voter register. And what was actually interesting for me to see there was that the ruling parties more or less accepted the concessions on the transparency. So they did not argue against those proposals from the civil society. What they argued against and what they wanted to actually influence much more was the audit process and the composition of the commission that would carry out this process. So we can see there what they perceive probably as more dangerous to their interests. So transparency, as I mentioned in my presentation as well, in and of itself will not solve the problems, but I would not underestimate it. It can help create political pressure and attract the attention to a certain topic. Actually, the voter register in Serbia became a bit more transparent a couple of years ago, and that was already used by CERTA in 2023 to notice and find suspicious patterns regarding local elections, which was one of the proofs and parts of evidence that led to the discussion about the Belgrade local elections in 2023. But as we can see from the reactions of the government in Serbia, the audit is actually the thing that is the most important, and we have no guarantees at the moment that it will be carried out in Serbia properly. We have seen that the EU conditionality can produce results, but the EU also has a habit of only applying its conditionality up to a certain point, and then actually letting the process go and assessing that it was enough, even though the process is not finished. So I hope that this time the conditionality will be applied more consistently, though we do not have signals that it would or wouldn't. We will have to see. But merely adopting a law that sets the preconditions for an audit is not enough, of course. We need the process to be carried out through to its end. And we will see in the coming years, because it will take months if it begins, whether it will produce results or not. So these were my comments for now.
Thank you very much. So we did talk a lot about the European Union's potential role in putting some pressure, exercising its leverage in order to achieve reforms. You have all highlighted how central political will is to address the issue, and indeed in the context of state capture, I think it's very obvious that without political will, the root causes will not be dealt with. I would like to first address this problematic. So there may be the European Union that can increase political will through its conditionality. What other opportunities you do see to, if you will, orchestrate or increase that political will in the given countries? Are there any maybe positive examples where maybe exposure, maybe transparency, the bringing of these issues to light have shifted somewhat the balance? The question really goes to all of you. Whoever would like to jump in
Okay,
first.
I will answer at least a part of the question. Well, we had a case of Macedonia in 2016 where there was actually a audit of the voter registry, even though, as I mentioned both in the presentation and in my paper, there were some criticism of the process. There were some assessments that it wasn't enough, that it only solved the issue partially and so on. But even that process was a product of international pressure, actually. So the transitional government, which should improve electoral conditions, was actually agreed because of the pressure of the European Union again. So I think that a problem here is that these issues are very technical, and you cannot keep the focus of the domestic public on them long enough for a sustained domestic pressure to take place. One needs international allies in this area, especially when it comes to this issue. And I think the only reason why the Serbian government even participated in the process, even if they are simulating the reforms, even started to simulate the reforms, was because of the international pressure. So the role of the civil society, domestic civil society, is crucial. But without international support, I don't think it will achieve much, at least in the current regional political constellation.
Thank you. Dario, Zlatko, would you like to add anything to this?
Just to add something that already mentioned, Aleksandar, this is a huge issue, and this is a very big problem that could not be solved by domestic actors alone, neither opposition, neither civil society, because only one dimension is within the country, each of the countries. The other dimension, as explained, Aleksandar, was actually, and Dario used very good term, falange, birača. Actually, now we are seeing and understanding that in the region, Vučić is organizing phalange that are moving across the countries and influencing final outcome of elections. This is too big. This is something that needs to get support of the EU. EU has incentives, they have instruments. Especially now where there is the window opportunity as President Vučić is very weak. Actually now he would maybe be ready to accept much more than usually he's ready to do, because to be frank, only Serb official Belgrade has those kind of the resources to meddle in all these electoral processes, you know. So that should be one of the pillars integrity of electoral process, and also the voters should be one of the pillar of negotiation process. Because when we will become a member of the EU, or for example, some of us become a member, for example, Montenegro has the perspective to join to 2028. Serbia is probably out of the EU after 2028. So is Serbia going to change the will of the voters in one of the EU member states, like now is doing in one of the NATO member states, you know? This is something really big. So EU should take their responsibility and jump in this process and push it in order to finally domestic actors like the civil society had really political and strong will of the EU, because with EU support, a lot of things could be changed in the positive direction.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I completely agree with both Aleksandar and Zlatko. You know, it is sometimes just hard to expect from people who are part of the problem to be part of the solution. And I think this is the reason why both Aleksandar and Zlatko mentioning the role of international community, how we title them in general, you know. So yeah, and it is true, because election problems are also outcome or consequence of the state capture phenomena and the biggest amounts of the corruption that are possible in one country, you know, systemic institutional corruption. And this is the key issue that we are fighting, I think, because any problems in any almost segment society, whether it is politics, health, education, or election, is consequence of state capture phenomena. And this struggle will take longer, you know, than probably some kind of the midterm or short-term solutions are possible. But why elections are important? Elections are important as the first pillar of democracy, you know, because then we come to this how the people who are part of the problem cannot be part of the solution. Because if we have criminals ending up in government, we cannot expect that these criminals starting to behaving as politicians. They will continue to behave as criminals. I'm not want to generalize. I don't want to say that all people are like that. Far away from that, but with a good portion of proven track of records of election irregularities in previous time, including direct manipulation with the results in the most recent general elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina 2022, where we have this like evidence based. It is hard then to expect different kind of behavior, you know. And I'm not being critical of the EU for the sake of being critical. I think the EU has no alternative. This is the only joint vision of the citizens in fragmented country, my country, as Bosnia and Herzegovina is. But sometimes, you know, this is like too soft approach, you know, in a way that there is some conditioning, but it's not conditioning, that, you know, there is always nice behavior, trying not to offend domestic politicians, even that they maybe deserve more harsh language or more proper direct messages, direct vision of the EU. Yes, EU can be helpful and should be helpful, but the EU also needs to be more clear on what they want, be more focused to deliver results, be more focused to pressurize these who should deliver these results. It will probably also lead to becoming more relevant, not only in Balkans region, but generally, you know. But Aleksandar, I think, in one point of time mentioned that tick the box approach, you know, maybe he didn't call that way, but you need to push things until the end in order to have the complete solutions, because working the same way with the same people and not changing anything in that equation cannot change the fact that situation is worse and worse in many segments of the societies in Western Balkans. You need to change something in that equation. And yes, combination of the conditioning, pressure, clear messages, expected the outcomes or results, and working with the drivers of change internally if they exist, will probably give results. Because in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the maybe only segment of the society that we have progress in last, let's say, more than maybe 8 years is the election process. But the drivers of this change are not politicians, unfortunately. Drivers of this change are citizens who, in big numbers, saying what they want. Office of High Representative, which can impose laws in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the Central Election Commission, which is probably one of the most professional institutions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, combined with the pressure on them to deliver, and this gives results.
Thank you very much to all of you. So I think you highlighted the complexity of the issue, and one point that I just want to amplify maybe from Dario's comment is that the EU conditionality and incorporating this particular issue into the negotiation process about EU accession in itself is not enough. The European Union, the Commission, also needs to show follow through and credible commitment to demand the upholding of the democratic principles it expects from accession countries. But beyond the state and international institutions, the role of civil society was also mentioned. And of course, civil society in itself, it's clear it cannot solve the problem. But in the absence of the political will, what can civil society realistically do? You have mentioned that it has been independent media, investigative journalists, civil society that really shed light on this practice. And I think that is something that is crucial as it increases awareness. So while the ground is potentially being prepared for reforms, what can civil society organizations realistically do to support and further this process? And what do they need in order to play a role in this? How do you see this? Aleksandar, would you like to jump in on this, or?
Well, I think that this question is more for Zlatko and Dario, because they have experience with exactly this type of issues, more experience than me, at least.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dario?
so I can speak from our angle. What we do is a really like broad topic, not only to this problem. Yeah, civil society should be someone who fights for the solution of key problems of the citizens. So I think that the major role is that civil society raise certain problems on the public level, or to welcome citizens, hug citizens, embrace citizens in order to be a force of fighting for the solutions or for the betterment. Unfortunately, civil society, whether it plays this role and whether it plays good, we can discuss it, and maybe lack of confidence or lack of trust in civil society in Western Balkans is also pretty low from citizens and can be discussed. But this is like the lighthouse. Yeah, so we should be a safe harbor for citizens to address on their issues, but we should also be someone who put light on the track in order to give citizens explanation or how to say to show them that certain problems in society exist which may not be directly connected for their everyday life. And elections are one of these subjects. Citizens are maybe not fully aware how the election manipulations, stealing elections have immediate impact on their lives. And our role is working on this to raise these problems on the public level. We do it through different things. Election monitoring or election observation is one of the key issues and not issues, but key activities that we perform in a large number in order to offer evidence-based data in order to have good ground for the future advocacy of the changes that are needed, but also publicizing these data, reporting these irregularities to competent institutions, making pressure that they react and similar. But also we do it through different kind of the policy formulations, different kind of the advocacy efforts and citizen education or citizen participation activities. Maybe just to illustrate there, we were first in Bosnia and Herzegovina to suggest or give a recommendation of introducing new technologies in election process. It was back in 2016. Next year elections, we will first have full-scale new election technologies being applied in all polling stations in Bosnia and Herzegovina, 6,000 almost of them, actually 5,400 of regular polling stations, electronic voter identification devices with the fingerprint technology and scanners for the ballot scanning. This was something that was revolutionary to suggest back then, and this was something the citizens were not understanding fully how this helps at their everyday life. But in August 2024, when we conducted research, 83% of the general population was highly in favor of introduction of new technologies as a way to prevent election irregularities. There was no difference between entities. There was no difference between ethnic groups in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is rare to see. 83% were in every part of the country highly supportive of this. In just 45 days in 2022, we collected more than 100,000 signatures of people as part of the citizen petition for the introduction of new technologies. I think this type of activities can create visible public pressure to hopefully domestic leaders who are paid and elected to do their job and to fulfill citizens' wishes, but also, in Bosnia and Herzegovina circumstances to those who have possibility to react and resolve this situation. Regarding the voter register itself, we done voter register audit back in 2019 actually, but we were given this voter register by some strange channels, not officially from the Central Election Commission. They never gave us to us this. Even every political party almost have it, which participate in election in their own constituencies. And we discovered certain these statistical discrepancies or strange situations, too many people being in this same place or the same polling station level. We had I don't know, 4,000 and something people above 100 years old. We had some suspicions cross-checking on that deceased persons are on the voters list and similar. The first reaction of the CC, for example, back then was that we are lying, creating a problem. Then it was that we are over-exaggerating, making problem bigger than it is. And then third reaction was that they deleted 5,500 people who are deceased from the voters list, and that they marked additional 500 with a star because they had some kind of the bureaucracy obstacles in order to delete them. And they did react, in that way. So regarding the organized voter migration, the precondition is to have the insight into voter register, to do either voter audit or to cross-check data with complementary organizations which do the same or similar job in the region. Yeah.
Maybe I can jump in. NGOs in Montenegro I will talk about Montenegro, are highly influential, and there is a strong political input. One reasons, okay, small country, but also what is different compared with some other transitional countries. In Montenegro, leader of the civil society remain in civil society organization. They didn't left and they didn't move to political parties. At least most of them, the most influential. So actually, somehow we are also older than we were when we were beginning. You know, my organization is 20-year-old, celebrated this year 25 years of existence, and now I am somehow connecting the time, also celebrate 50 years. So it is half of my life is actually related to the for election observation. I was not aware of that before answering on your question. But on the other hand, you know, we succeeded. Our successes are huge. I will just remember 2 laws that we officially proposed to the parliament were adopted. And now there is the electoral reform in Montenegro, and CeMI, my organization, is a part of it as a member of the board. And we actually were advocating for the reform of electoral administration for more than 15 years. And this year, almost all solutions developed by CeMI were adopted, and now they are implementing them. And the difference between a civil society and some other political actor or social actor, we keep going. We are pushing. We are not going back. You know, we don't say, okay, we cannot do it. No, we are repeating, and pushing. At the end, one moment, window opportunity opens, and we seize that opportunity. Like now, we seize that in Montenegro. There is a continuation of the electoral reform. It's not finished, but what we achieved in this first part, that was not possible. That was not realistic only a few years ago. 1 year ago, it was not realistic to expect that. The politicization of electoral administration, Central Election Commission, removing the political party representative from the Central Election Commission, then introducing the real zip quota in the electoral law, and many other things that are not now to be discussed here. But the success is possible. And the civil societies in Western Balkans, I would say, not only for Montenegro, are the key accelerator of the democratic transition, democratic reform. But somehow we are alone. Somehow we are left even from the Western partners, you know. And that's the problem, because Western partners, and I'm talking now in the first EU, the Germany, you know, sometimes they left us just, you know, they don't care. There's something, maybe it's lithium, maybe something else is in stake, you know, but it's not good to open and raise those issues. And this is weakening us. And now we can witness the huge attacks on the civil society organization across the Western Balkans. In Montenegro, we are in specific situation. One way, this is the hardest ever attacks of the civil society organization that are parallelly with the commendation of the efforts of our government to join the EU, which is not realistic, to be frank. You know, we are moving fast and probably will join the EU in 2028 at the end. But on the other hand, it's not based on the quality of the results somehow delivered by our government, because main part of our ruling majority is anti-Western. It is anti-European. So now we are fighting with the Putin puppets in Montenegro, you know, that they are telling to the civil society leader fighting for the EU for decades, you're against the EU and we are leading the process, you know. Those who are doing everything to block that process, you know. So it's very difficult, but on the other hand, I think that civil society would remain the key actors, but without the Western partners, because sometimes we cannot find allies in the country. They don't understand us sometimes.
Yeah, if I can shortly reflect, real shortly, first regarding Zlatko's experience, long experience, I read the good sentence most recently, like, I cannot believe that I'm the same age as the old people, you know. So we are coming to these ages.
Thank you, Dario, for that.
Yeah, it's the same for me. So yeah, Yes, regarding the impact that civil society can have, yeah, sometimes it takes, but for example, when we look back, Podlupom as an election observation group exists for a little bit more than 10 years. In this period, 54 of our recommendations were fully or partly implemented by the either OHR office, which is not the best maybe case scenario, Central Election Commission, or in some cases even the parliaments. But what Zlatko said about opportunity windows, I see our role as some kind of facilitators of systemic changes. And yes, when this opportunity window to create something that is hopefully sustainable, and hopefully government will pay for it, and hopefully, it will be for sake of people, and hopefully there will be some at least partial independent institutions implementing it, we use and we should use this opportunity windows. And the second thing that Zlatko, I think, more or less said similarly, is that we have strong position and luxury of being independent and not making bad compromises. And what I learned so far from this experience, this is like 4-stage process, because first, when you go with something new or push in some direction, which is maybe there is reluctancy to it, yeah, you will be ignored. This is the first phase. Second phase is phase of false friendship. They will accept you, listen you, but do nothing. When you are still persistent, they will try to openly attack you, to try to discredit you, to try to use all the machinery against you. And then you come to the fourth phase, which is the most important phase, when they start to listen. And persistency to come to the fourth stage is needed. It's not maybe easy for the ordinary citizens because they don't have this backup of, I don't know, developed democracies or money support, financial support, but we should at least keep to ourselves and to our role in the society because we have this.
Thank you for that to both of you, actually, and this really goes well beyond the specific issue about voter migration and how to tackle that, and electoral integrity. I think what you have been raising about the role of civil society is something that we grapple with across the entire sector, regardless of the specific issue. And perseverance, persistence are indeed key elements, even when the fight feels like a very lonely fight. So I really absolutely admire your dedication to this. We are slowly moving towards the end of our discussion. So before I give back the floor to Aleksandar to maybe also reflect on what you, Zlatko and Dario, have been saying, I would also like to just pick up 2 questions from the audience, which have been fairly specific. So maybe to close, we can also dig into those, the nitty-gritties a little bit deeper. One question we have received specifically connects to the issue of vote buying schemes and the rise of illicit financial flows in the Western Balkans. And our participant is asking if there is any evidence rising of an increase in vote buying practices that we have also been observing across the region, but also specifically the case mentioned here is that of Moldova. So the interconnectedness between vote buying and organized voter migration would be one angle. And another thing that I would like to just throw at you, and maybe it will be something for Dario, but feel free to answer that too, is Dario, you specifically brought up that people who do not live in a municipality should not be voting there. And I tend to share your position, but there are certain situations when people temporarily leave their residence to study, to work abroad, or work somewhere else in the country. So how should such situations be tackled? And should people then, in these cases, give up their right to vote in the given municipality when these are just temporary times? And I think one reason to really consider this is that mobility is increasingly common across various life cycles. People move around for temporary jobs, especially when there is high stability in the workforce and in work opportunities. How can we address such situations? First, I would pass the floor back to Aleksandar, and then we make sure to still bring in Dario and Zlatko to the discussion.
So regarding the question of vote buying, my research does not focus on that issue specifically. I know by reading the election reports from all Western Balkan countries that it is a persistent issue, of course. It is numerous allegations of vote buying are recorded each time an election takes place. And it is certainly connected with organized voter migration, because we can assume that many of these people are paid to come to a certain location and vote. It's just that I do not have and haven't seen specific data which would prove that there has been a rise or fall in these practices. The problem is that we are mostly always talking about allegations and allegations which election observers try to verify. Vote buying, at least in Serbia, as far as I know, is a criminal act, but people rarely report it to the institutions because there is a lack of trust in the institutions. And this is why I don't think we have the numbers, but maybe other panelists have data that I do not have. But certainly the two issues are interconnected. It's just that the dynamics in recent years are hard to determine.
Would you like to address the other question as well, Aleksandar?
Well, I think Dario is better suited to address it, but I can add my thoughts in the end.
Okay. Zlatko?
Maybe to just lower my hand. Okay. Someone mentioned regarding the financial incentives, vote buying. Is it also followed by? Yes, actually, yes. There is no this kind of the voter migration without significant financial incentives. You know, why someone would. There is one interesting story when I was discussing with my colleagues from CETA regarding why they don't mention the voter migration. It was related to the local election in Belgrade 2023, that first rigged election. Voters from Serbia, from Montenegro, sorry. And the problem was with the methodology and the access to information from the voter registry. At the beginning, I was not aware that CETA and domestic observer in Serbia don't have access to the voter registry like we do. They have a very limited access to information, and it is very difficult to really compare the data. So they were using the methodologies which were the best possible in that situation, but it is not fully comparable, you know. So what is the disadvantage of that access? And I became aware when we were discussing that, because the problem, those that were moved to voter register in 2023, as they cannot access to the real data from the voter registry, you cannot identify them for the next election. They are identified for the first election, and now they stay in the voter registry. And they can change the local addresses, the permanent residents within the country, but I'm talking about the voter register from Republic Srpska or from Bosnia and Herzegovina. When we are talking about the Montenegrin voters, why they were not mentioning? Because they are already in the voter registry. They didn't move for the local election 2023. They were there from the previous electoral processes, you know. And without real access to the voter registry, you cannot specify the numbers and that was the very limiting. So only the force that has a lot of the funding could organize that. In the case in Montenegro, before there was a lot of the migration from the both sides when DPS was ruling and when opposition changed. But now it is fully dominated by the Serbian authority because it requests a lot of the funding, a lot of the logistic, and that could be only provided by someone who is in power, who rules, but also, we were all happy that Serbia was supporting the Ukraine with selling the arms, to Ukraine. But this is a lot of that money is black money. It's not official state money, and that money is used also to rig elections, to buy votes, a lot of illegal funding. So this is very problematic. When you are talking, someone mentioned about it was more related to Dario question, but I think others to Dario. We should make distinction between the permanent and temporary residencies, So Dario was referring on the permanent residencies. If someone wants to go abroad to study, to go to some medical treatment or whatever, they still has the right to vote in that municipality. But if the permanent address is changed, you cannot vote in the EU. You cannot vote on local election in two cities, EU citizenship is allowing you to vote as a European citizen in the country of your permanent residence and on the local election of the country of your residence and the municipality without mixing, not depending on your national citizenship. So same thing, we cannot allow the people to have 2, 3, 4 permanent residency, only one. But temporary, that's different.
Yeah, I will just jump in shortly. I completely agree. I think Zlatko covered everything. It is hard to expect that this interconnection between vote buying and organized voter migration does not exist. It probably happens because of certain benefit given to those people. Grounded evidence is saying that they have organized transport, that they have per diems, and that they have some kind of the refreshment sandwiches, and they got So this is at least what they got. But when we speak of vote buying, it is not only about black funds of money and using cash for this. In the organized corrupt system or state capture phenomena, there is a bunch of ways to do it. You get employment based on the promise that you will vote for someone or exerting your voting right in favor of someone. You get social benefits. You finished your education based on this. You know, there is a bunch of different things how institutional money is abused in order to do vote buying from the state budgets. And this is the benefits that the transactions that are made. So of course, yeah, no one, I think no one or almost no one, there is little number of people that are so crazy in love in their dictators that they will go and do this for free, you know, on the election day. And second, regarding the, yes, should they vote in the municipality? Yes, Zlatko perfectly explained it. I will just add one example. Dobretici, small municipality, 2020, local elections. One third of voters was from voting abroad who do not de facto live there, thanks to the big diaspora of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, thanks to the war consequences. There is a big number of people voting all over the place. One third of population. And what happened? 2/3 of the population who live de facto in that municipality chose one mayor. When the votes by post came, another person was chosen. It's changed the outcome of the election result. So I think this is deeply not fair. Of course, if you are temporarily somewhere, such as students, you should vote somewhere. It's not that you are completely losing your voting rights, and probably it is your municipality of residence where you are temporarily not available to vote or present. Yeah.
Thank you very much also for the example and the clarification. We unfortunately have reached the end of our allocated time. But before wrapping up, I would like to give the floor to Aleksandar just for 1 minute. You have formulated very clear policy recommendations in your paper. I think looking at all the body of literature that I have seen being produced in the ReThink.CEE Fellowship, you have done an outstanding job really to be very practical, very clear. So I just want to pass the floor back to you for a short moment to highlight what would be really the next steps to take to tackle this problem in a bullet point fashion, if you will. Just please wrap up with that, and then I'll conclude.
Thank you, Zsuzsanna. Thank you for your kind words. So the main thing that the civil society organizations need to do is to continue to monitor elections, to continue to report on all irregularities, to continue to research whether this practice is happening or not, to what extent, what are the evidence, and so on, to continue producing political pressure and creating political atmosphere in which these issues can be addressed. Dario and Zlatko mentioned windows of opportunity. For example, in Serbia, there are very few windows of opportunities because the current government is quite resistant to changing the rules of the game that suits the government. But sometimes things like EU pressure comes, sometimes things like protests arise, and like the current student protests in Serbia, which change the political atmosphere, which produce some opportunities. So gathering data and expertise is always valuable, and civil society organizations will always have an opportunity to use them at some point. And when the window of opportunity opens, voter registry audit by institutions, increasing transparency, those are the two main steps that states should do, pressured by their citizens if they must, as well as cooperating with other countries in the region to clarify the discrepancies in the voter registry, as we have mentioned repeatedly during this conversation.
Thank you very much, Aleksandar. And thank you for dedicating a big chunk of your time over the past year to research this issue. We are very happy that we could support your research and hope to continue our work together. I would like to thank also Zlatko, Vujovic, and Dario, Jovanovic for joining us today, sharing your expertise and your experience. It has been really incredibly insightful, and I think we have a much clearer and more complex of the picture thanks to you. So thanks a lot for being here. To our attendees, I would like to thank you for sticking with us. I would like to encourage you also to download Aleksandar's paper. It has been really very nicely put together, very insightful work. So I think it can be very useful for all of you. We will continue with our ReThink.CEE discussions. Our next event is going to take place on the 28th of October, and we will be discussing civic education and political culture in the Western Balkans with Emma Jaina Smolov-Zhukan, who is also one of our ReThink.CEE fellows from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Our invitations for this discussion will go out shortly. So please follow our work, sign up for our newsletters, follow us on social media, and we will be very happy to welcome you at our future events. Again, Aleksandar, Zlatko, Dario, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.